Joshua Hayward, founder of Breath of Life School in Yellow Springs, Ohio, and thanks for joining me for Life Readings, this week in the Stars and Cards. So if you're the kind of person who's seeking info and guidance on how to move out into the circumstances and events of your life, how to deal with people and go towards your goals, really crush it, that's fantastic. But if you're also the type of person who is seeking spiritual meaning, is looking to build a strong core in wisdom and understanding, and be blessed by both of them, well, then you've come to the right place, because we're going to stir up an admixture of both the inner wisdom and the outer wisdom for you each week here at Stars and Cards. And, well, let's just get to it. So, no matter who you are or where you are right now, here you are watching this video that tells me one thing, that you're interested in, what about this eclipse, Joshua? You're interested in finding out what the possibilities and what the implications are around this solar new moon eclipse that's coming up on the 10th. I guess that's this Thursday at somewhere around 6 in the morning. So, am I wrong? No. Even if you weren't thinking about that, you are now. We like to have a little fun around here. So, in having fun is a really important thing, because we've stepped with the first eclipse. It's almost like we've stepped off a cliff, and we're in free fall. And the second eclipse is more like, how are we going to land, and how, or will we land at all? Will we be transformed like Gandalf, falling down in those mines in the Lord of the Rings, and he dies, and he comes back from Gandalf the Grey to Gandalf the White. And so what you're seeing in these 2 weeks might be a little bit shaking, and your hair might be turning white like Gandalf's, but we've jumped off the cliff. And what will happen? The second eclipse determines so much about who you are and how you're going to be engaging in your circumstances. What is the degree of intensity in the outer world? What is the degree of pressure and control from the patriarchy? Okay, so these are really good questions when you're considering this second eclipse. All right, so the first one, of course, was in Sagittarius. The second one is in Gemini. So, and the north node of the moon, south node of the moon. Okay, south node of the moon is Gemini, north node, Sagittarius, and the north node of the moon is Gemini. And that's got to do with the collective, about where we're going right now, where we've been and where we're going. Sagittarius, I've said before, the shadow side of that being ideology, and hence the intensity of patriarchal control is such a really big concern right now. In the age that we're moving into, the age of Aquarius, the new thing that's happening here, the new paradigm, we're moving away from that kind of control. So with the north node of the moon being in Gemini, and this second eclipse falling in Gemini, it's falling into where we're going. And there's Mercury also retrograding in Gemini there as well. Venus just passed through Gemini, it's now in Cancer. A lot of Geminian energy. If your thoughts have been swirling around, well, now you know why. Okay, but so it's got to do with thinking and how we think about things and how we think about our lives. And I know for me that I've been overthinking everything recently, and that's one of my things, is like how to balance the intense amount of thought process that goes on through me, and then also that process of intuition and the psychic connection and inner understanding, which is got to some extent in its heart. And where's the balance between that? That's in the mix right now too. Let's mix the metaphors up and say, let's leave the cliff and Gandalf behind, and let's look at it like a crucible. And it's like alchemy, and here's the dross elements of regular metal, and we're trying to refine ourselves, and we're getting better, hopefully, but we're going for the gold now. So we're in that crucible, in that alchemic kind of container in between these eclipses. And what's at stake here is our frequency of thought process and how we move between the mental world and the psychic and the intuitive world. All right, so the sun and the moon are going to be in Gemini here at a conjunction, and that signals a new moon. It's an annular eclipse. We will be able to see it if anyone wants to get up that early. I think it's a really good thing to do. Take safety precautions if you do. And it'll be a partial eclipse, but it still could be really interesting. But you don't have to see the eclipse to understand that it's perception and consciousness that's at work here. It's almost as if we're taking part of what we don't need to think about anymore, and we're frying that up in that crucible, and we're transforming those thought forms, and they come out magically if we allow them into who we're becoming, which is we're becoming people who are more connected to the heart, more connected to Christ consciousness, more connected to love. And it's a frequency of love. And when we live in that world that's dominated by intellectual thought processes and left brain stuff, the joy tends to just sort of drain off, just seep away so much. And so we want a better approach to life. We want to enjoy our lives more. That's a good test of what frequency are you at, with your spiritual frequency. And if you're really down a lot in between these two eclipses, here's some useful information. Check to see that you're like if you're failing at something. Like, this is what I tend to do as I run. Oh geez, I always do this. I can't really. Boy, I really screw these things. If you're running that kind of program, and see, I just shared that I will do that sometimes, then I realize I'm not in the right frequency that I need to live in. That's a lower frequency. I'm also told about there's this photon belt thing that's happening where we're getting more of that type of energy, which makes it so we can hold more light frequency in our field. Things to consider. Okay, so the sun and moon and Mercury pretty much conjunct in Gemini. These, during this eclipse, this is on a square, a pretty good square to Neptune in Pisces, which is the total psychic attunement to spirit, which is what that's about. Incredibly psychic and very right brain. And so you're looking at this. It's not so much that you need to get rid of thinking. We can't ever do that. It's just we need to generate new thought forms and have a balance between the psychic world or the intuitive world and the thinking world. And because what we think about, what we dwell on, that's what really colors the texture of our experience in life. Okay, think about that. Feel that for a minute. Okay, so, let's go to a nexus between the thinking and the intuitive world. And that's got to do with creativity, and that's in the heart. There's not a whole lot of heart stuff per se in this eclipse, but I feel that that's where we need to go. And that's where Christ consciousness is. Okay. And that is when we remember that we are one with all of creation. We are one with God. Okay. We need to pull a balance between those worlds. And I think that that's what this eclipse is about. So, when we really look at things, there's a couple other things to really be concerned with. I mentioned previously a couple of times the Uranus square to Saturn, Saturn in Aquarius and Uranus in Taurus. And this is the most intense part of that square. It'll come back into the square. It's pulling apart, but this is the most intense part of that square that's happening right now. And that's a battle between restrictions and freedom. That's reducing it down to the simplicity of the whole thing. But so how much we're looking with Saturn Aquarius, we're looking to build a new structure. And with Uranus and Taurus, we're needing to change and to move into the values that will lead to an enlightened structure so we can have more freedom in our lives. That's what's going on in a big way right now. Let's see, what else? Yeah. Well, with Neptune on a square to that stuff, it's also kind of on a trine to Mars right now. And as that happens, or at least during that eclipse, and when Mars, okay, let's back up. Yeah, Neptune will be on a trine to Mars, which is a very dynamic connection with the egoic projecting of the self into reality. With Mars in Cancer, kind of, instinctively, with feeling. And so there's an opportunity for divine timing. That's another important part of the eclipse. Another part of the eclipse is that Pluto and Mars is moving into an opposition, trine to Neptune, but opposition to into Pluto. And that's a dangerous type of opposition. So we're really looking at some big type changes when Pluto-Mars adversarial kind of relationship by that opposition. We might be seeing some governmental stuff. Also in attempts at control. The Saturn and Uranus square also could produce some tighter restrictions from the government and from religion and things like that. Let's face it, that all that stuff is breaking down. The Pluto and Saturn conjunction in the sign of Capricorn that came together and is now passed is really about breaking down patriarchal control and moving into another paradigm, that Aquarian paradigm that I mentioned. Okay, so right now, where we're at with that Pluto-Mars, and that's a temporary thing, but it is kind of like a snapshot that's really important because it's right during that eclipse. And so it's a good time to determine your own authority and to not recognize structures and pressure and control on you that's going to take away your joy and it's going to take away your freedom. And I'm not talking about conspiracies or anything like that here, Although, people with conspiracies oftentimes, are should I go there really? But they're talking about being afraid about control. But maybe, and as they put out that fear, and we should be afraid of these things. Well, that's kind of controlling in and of itself. And pretty much not productive in my opinion. So there's so much of that going on right now that we needed a little bit of exclamation point on that to say that we need to pay attention to how we're feeling and we need to reject other people's projections on us and even our own stupid projections from the limited egoic structure. of that personality that's not aligned with the soul very well. Okay, so here is an opportunity to let the personality and the ego let go of those restrictions a little bit, recognize them, accept, let that go, and move into a closer relationship with soul, with spirit, with God, with Jesus, with the Holy Spirit, with all of divinity. Just letting that sink in for a second. That's what your opportunity is here, okay? So that's plenty of stuff. You know, there are other things that are happening, like there's kind of a, I believe there's a Chiron in the wounded healer in the sign of Aries is sextiling the sun and the moon and Mercury during this eclipse here. And so that's a great time for healing. That sextile produces that healing energy like a double-term quartz, you know, connected between those energies, of those thinking energies of in the Geminian thing, into that sacred warrior of Aries. So we're really looking at some positive energy there too. But let's go. I've gone a little bit farther in terms of length of time in this video than I planned on going. I was trying to streamline it a little bit, and I want to get to where consumption is probably a little bit shorter, so you guys can kind of get in and get out and get on with your days a little bit faster. Sorry about that in terms of this video here. But let's do 3 cards that will work with what's been given so far. Are you with me so far? Okay, you wanted to know about the eclipse. Here it is, all right? The first card is one of those negative thinking type of cards, and it's called futility. It's the 7 of Swords. Just hold it right here for a minute. And notice how that sword is trying to move towards something that is being prevented by other ideas. So that's some of that negative kind of thing. We're really looking at a mess of futility right now that really limits our consciousness. And we're needing to transform this energy. So that's so important with this card. And the moon is in Aquarius in this card, so there's this emotional striving for individuality and for new experience, and to have some fun, but it's trapped in this thing where things don't move. They're being prevented by some screwed up ideas in minds and people sometimes. And this can be ourself, not so much other people doing this to us, but we probably received some of that negativity from them at some point, and we made it ourselves. We tend to project on ourselves as much as having other people project on us. So that's what this card is, futility. And let's go with 2 more. And okay, well here's, when I talked about the Crucible, well here it is. Another card that might be really cool in terms of the Crucible is the Art card. And that's, which is called Temperance in other decks, but in this card it's called, see, I pulled one card, but I'm talking about another. They're really so connected though. The Death card is so connected to that particular card that I have to mention it, because the Crucible actually exists in the image, that alchemic gold that's being created is right there in that card. Well, that's so connected to the Death card, because this is the death of this old futility in our lives, if we so choose to transform, you know, like the butterfly moving from the chrysalis, right? You know, and I'm not talking about Lazarus coming out of the grave so much, you know, it's metaphorical. It can be literal. But in this particular case, it's the transformation of our beliefs and our thought forms that are futile and interfering. and the rebirth of a different type of consciousness, and that's what wants to happen. And the astrological sign in this card is Scorpio. Okay, and there's not really any Scorpio happening astrologically, but in terms of the cards, here it is. Okay, so are you willing to be reborn? Okay, so one thing that I've been talking about is the sacred warrior. And I mentioned Chiron in Aries, that wounded healer, earlier in this session, and I'll just mention it again. Chiron in Aries is on a sextile in a positive way to the Sun, the Moon, Mercury. Okay, and what we have here is an image of a real healed sacred warrior, the Prince of Wands exploding on that chariot in creativity, really connected once again to that art card. But here's the death, the rebirth of a new type of male energy. I know male energy is not real popular these days since hashtag Me Too and all that stuff, but we can't get rid of it. You can't get rid of the ego. What you can do is transform those things. And so whether you're in a female body or a male body, whether you're non-binary or what have you, you still have this flow of male-female balance going on within you. And so this eclipse really has so much to do with how we assert our lives and assert ourselves in the circumstances of our lives. So I'm saying right now, if we go in and we do this inner transformation, that spiritual growth that I'm talking about, we've got the opportunity to come to really adopt or adapt or whatever word works for that. The energy of this card, which is not a heavily restrained male energy that's frustrated. No, this is a very free energy that's moving towards change. He's on a chariot of fire. Okay? So that's what's possible here. It's the death of that futility, and it's the transformation of that energy. And that's the ability to go out into our world, having changed some things inwardly, in order to really set ourselves up energetically at a new frequency to go on about our lives and to create new structure and embrace our lives in a different way as we move into these Aquarian times. So, okay, a little bit long, but we'll just end it here. And it's a good thing as we move through this week and any week to acknowledge the divine energy that's present in us and to seek the divine in all things. And that's the type of consciousness, when you see some of that negative thinking, to transform it and move into seeing life from a perspective of divinity. Can really, really make a difference. You move into the frequency of love.